my name is Shalini Deshwal. I brought in a porthole from HMCS Trentonian from the Naval Museum of Halifax. Currently, I am the co-op student, so I'm just spending my co-op term there. So it's my second term with them, really loving it, and lots to learn. I love going to museums, so yes, I love history.
HMCS Trentonian was an upgraded version of the same class of World War II corvette as HMCS Sackville, which presently serves as a floating museum on the Halifax waterfront. Trentonian was torpedoed by a German U-boat and sank off the coast of Falmouth, England in 1944. Removing items from sunken warships is highly frowned upon, and the wrecks of some naval vessels are protected by law. But that doesn't deter industrial pirates from raising barnacle-encrusted hulls for scrap metal, or some recreational divers from retrieving souvenirs. Sometimes, though, conscience prevails, and these precious artifacts are donated to museums that will properly preserve them and honour the memories of those who perished.
Hi Shalini, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I brought a porthole from the HMCS Trentonian.
What do you know about the history of HMCS Trentonian?
Not very much, actually, but I'd love to learn more. It looks warped. What happened to it?
This is actually a porthole from the ship that was recovered from the ship itself on the ocean floor. So what you're seeing is the impacts of the explosion of the torpedo on the ship itself. It sunk in about 14 minutes, and this blue color that you might assume is a patina is actually from the heat of the explosion and the fires that resulted. The warping is from just the sheer impact. And then in some places you can see where some barnacles have grown over time because the ship has been in the water for almost 80, 90 years.
Can I know more about the Trentonian?
HMCS Trentonian was a revised Flower-class corvette. The corvettes were sort of the workhorses of the Canadian Navy in the Second World War for the Battle of the Atlantic. They were quick and relatively cheap to produce, and they could get them built and out of the harbor and off to war very quickly, which at the time was a very important thing because so many ships were being lost. The Battle of the Atlantic was basically the Germans attempting to cut Europe off from allies in North America sending it supplies. So much industrial manufacturing and supplies such as food or personnel was being shipped in from Canada and then the United States when it declared war. If they could take those supply lines out, they could potentially cripple Europe and win the war. And up until about 1943, they were being quite successful at doing that. Trentonian had a crew of about 100 people, I think it was 97 to be exact, and it was on convoy escort duty. Convoys during the Second World War were organized to protect Allied shipping and to ensure that supplies, munitions, and personnel made it to Allied Europe. After a short turn, they were transferred over to more the English Channel area and were escorting D-Day convoys, and it was one of the lead corvettes involved in the D-Day invasion, and they helped to rescue survivors from the invasion. Eventually, it was sunk February of 1945 as the last corvette lost in the Second World War, and one of the last 3 ships lost by the RCN in the Second World War.
Judging by this porthole, it's pretty mangled. So what was the human loss when it went down?
The ship was sinking very quickly, and the captain gave the order to abandon ship, so as many as possible made it into lifeboats. Some were not so lucky. One individual was actually trapped. When the torpedo hit, the metal kind of bent back, and he was actually trapped in that metal, so they tried to save him, but they couldn't. It was heartbreaking because the poor young fellow was still alive. They could hear him until the ship actually sunk, and that will haunt some of those crew members until the day they died. In total, the ship lost 1 officer and 5 non-commissioned members who died, 1 on the lifeboat of injuries, another 14 were injured, and they lost their dog. The North Atlantic, especially in the winter, is a very, very cold place, so you risk exposure, hypothermia. You could be washed overboard with the right wave. Sometimes they would run out of food, or if they were picking up merchant seamen who were survivors of ships that had been sunk, what was already cramped quarters would be even more so, and food would be stretched even more thinly. You had the potential to get sick more often. You could be sunk and killed and drowned. It was all in all not a great experience.
So how did the Naval Museum of Halifax receive this item?
In May of 2021, thereabouts, Roger Littweiler was contacted by an individual who was a diving instructor. Roger Littweiler is a very well-known, well-respected historian who has a personal passion for HMCS Trentonian. And his book on HMCS Trentonian's story is very well regarded as a beautiful unit history. As a result of this passion, He was contacted by the instructor on a diving course who, even though he had warned his students not to take anything from the wreck when they were doing a technical dive on HMCS Trentonian, he discovered that some of his students had taken a couple of portholes from the ship. Even though they're not legally protected as war graves, they are considered to be, so there's sort of a moral and an ethical responsibility. Look but do not touch. Roger was able to connect with the RCN heritage staff and the museum and determine that one of the portholes was to come to the museum, and one of the portholes was to be sent to the Maritime Museum of the Great Lakes, which is currently located in the historic dockyards where Trentonian was built. We are pleased to be chosen as the caretakers for this significant piece of history.
So what is the Naval Museum of Halifax going to be doing with this artifact?
Currently, this porthole is on display in the second floor lobby of the museum, and over time we are going to permanently incorporate it into our Battle of the Atlantic Second World War exhibition. Well, Shalini, thank you very much for coming on the show today and helping me share the history of this HMCS Trentonian porthole.
Thank you for this opportunity.
It's really wonderful to see, especially youth, taking an interest and really taking those extra steps to learn more about their Canadian history.
I think history is really important. It's something that everybody should know and to better prepare themselves for life and know about the past and not make the same mistakes in the future. But if you're in the Navy, I think the museum is a really great resource to kind of learn about what you're going into and where we've been and where you can go.